Once again, we have Laura Scott and Madeline Gage.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Laura Scott.
And I'm Madeline Gage, and we are here from Johnston High School. If you want to access our presentation today, here is our Google URL. We are currently in our 4th year of being one-to-one with student iPads, and so we're always finding and exploring new ways to incorporate technology into our classrooms. As math teachers, we all know the importance of having students practice those essential math skills. And we've really been noticing that giving them a textbook homework assignment just isn't cutting it. It's not enough for them or for us. And so our goal this year was to find different ways to engage our students in practice that was a little bit different than the textbook. All right, so we're going to share a couple different technology tools that we found really helpful in assisting us in our goal. So our agenda today. Oh yeah, does anyone need that still?
Sorry about that.
Here. Okay, it is LVI. They look all the same. Yes, thank you so much.
Well, I guess while people are getting in, we can kind of give you a little bit of background about what we teach as far as at Johnston. I teach pre-calculus and Algebra 2.
And I teach Extended Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and then a Math Intervention Lab. So, good? Ready? Okay.
We still need it.
So I guess I'll start talking about our agenda for today. We're going to talk about 3 different technology tools. The first one being Desmos, the second Khan Academy, and lastly GoFormative. We'll give you kind of an overview of how we use them in our classrooms. We'll give you the student perspective, the teacher perspective, and then at the end we'll give you a little time to explore. So as many of you know of Desmos, it's a graphing calculator. That is one side of Desmos. It's a great resource and a tool for students and teachers. We're going to talk about a completely different side, though, the pre-made activities that Desmos has. So I'm going to have everyone jump on to student.desmos.com, and I have a code for you. We're going to play a little Guess Who game. And it's just like the children's game Guess Who, so you're going to be asking yes or no questions, but we're going to be playing with math and with graphs. So once you join that, you'll type in your name, and you'll get paired up with someone else in the room. We're going to give you about 4 or 5 minutes to play with this, and then we'll come back together and chat. So just a couple weeks ago, Laura and I, we used this activity in our Algebra 2 classroom. We use this as an introduction/refresher to domain and range. We had students play 1 round without giving them any information, and then we came back together and we talked about what strategies worked, what questions were really great to ask, and they kind of developed on their own, oh, we should be looking at X values, Y values, what work, what don't work. And they kind of figured out domain and range on their own. We then went back and played, and they kind of formalized those ideas, brushed up their questions to be a little more precise and mathematical. So that's kind of how we use this in our classroom. From the teacher perspective, I'm able to see all the questions that are being asked and answered. And so this is a great way to get students to ask questions and to have them practice their math terminology and vocabulary. So for example, we can pick out some questions. I might share some really great questions that students are asking, or I might pick out a not so great question and say, hey, turn to your partner, can you reword this? Can you use better terminology, or can you make this question clearer to help them with their questioning skills? So that's a little overview of polygraph.
I was surprised how excited the kids were about domain and range, a topic that is really usually pretty bland, pretty dry. We're like, okay, we need to try something because the kids aren't getting it. It's not an overly difficult topic, but it's something that the kids just weren't grasping for us. And so I was really surprised to see how excited the kids were to play the game, to interact, and to use the appropriate vocabulary.
And there's a lot of different options. It's not just domain and range. There's parabolas, lines. There's so many different options. All right. So I am going to head to the website where I found this, and it's just teachers.desmos.com. If you search for Desmos activities, it'll take you to that site. And this is what it's going to look like. There's a lot of different resources here, and you will just want to kind of sort through, find some of the good ones. I am going to come over here to these bundles. These bundles are pre-made by Desmos. They've already pre-sequenced and picked out really great resources that fit under those categories. And so just to show you a little taste of some of the other activity options, I'm going to go to Lego prices. And so students, they don't always have to be asking yes or no questions. For this one, they might have to answer a question. They might have to predict information. They're able to draw a graph. You can also input data into a table here. You can see that point. You can graph equations. So there's a lot of different options with these activities. Another thing we love to use in our classrooms, and we've always done them with paper, are card sorts. But now there are ways to do card sorts with technology. And so one of those options, there's a linear function card sort. And so students, I'm going to close this out, are able to match and do these card sorts online. It's really nice for me because as a teacher, I can see who has it and who doesn't. If they have the right matches, it turns green. If a student's entire screen is red, I know that they do not have any of their matches. They need help. All right, so there is a card sort. And with this, they still can have reflection questions, things to get them thinking. So there's a little bit about Desmos card sorts, activities. My recommendation is to just go and explore. There's a lot of really cool stuff. Also, I have found that I might love an activity, but I want to change the questions or I want to add something. It doesn't quite fit my learning goal. There's also the option to, let me see if I can find one that I can do this. There's the option to copy and edit. And so I can copy this, make it my own, add in different questions, really tailor it to my classroom. So that is another really nice option. All right. Anything else you want to add about Desmos activities?
I was just going to say, when I did, because I have like 2 Algebra 2 classes. So I make sure when I do these activities that I create a code for each class. That way I can compare and see how my first period class is doing compared to my 7-8 class. So just, if you don't create a code, it lumps all of them together. So if you create a code for each individual one, it'll separate your classes for you.
So overall, it's really great for investigations, practice, extension opportunities for students. It is self-paced. It can be an individual activity. You could work with partners, kind of whatever you would like. It provides really quick feedback, and it's really great for me to collect data as well.
And I feel like we've used them also with, like, when we're going to do a review day, we've given kids some options. You know, some of the students, you're still struggling with domain and range. You go ahead and you can work on this Desmos activity compared to some other ideas, giving those kids a little bit more choice.
All right, we're now going to shift to Khan Academy. And Khan Academy, you can either access it through the iPad app or the website. Some different ways that we've used this. We've used it as homework replacement, differentiated practice for students, a discussion generator. It also helps us to collect data on student progress, and it's a great video resource for students. All right, so I'm going to pull this up really quick. So when you go to Khan Academy, you are able to sort by your subject area, the content area that you are in. And so I might want to select Algebra 2 because we're Algebra 2 teachers. So I'm going to head down to Algebra 2. And we might want to look at polynomial expressions. There's 2 different things you can access in here. There's this triangle, which are all video resources. And then the stars are going to be practice exercise sets for students. And so here is one that I have pulled up. We'll talk about question types in a minute, but just looking at this screen, down at the bottom, this tells you exactly how many questions students have to get right in a row to pass this exercise set. So it's very self-differentiated. If a student knows their stuff, they'll get 5 right in a row or 3 right in a row and be done. If they're struggling, they need more practice and help, they're going to have to practice more in order to get 5 in a row correct. It's also really nice that there's a get a hint option. So if they're struggling, there's that help right there. There's also videos along the side, which will link to specific things that they might need to be successful with this.
I was going to say, this part can be kind of frustrating to kids sometimes, but I've had some really great conversations with my students on how can you check what you've put into Khan to make sure it's right before you go on, because they want to not have to do, they don't want to have to do 12 questions. They want to be able to do 5 and move on. So they're more motivated than, say, with a book assignment to make sure that they know exactly what's going on. And so I've had really great conversations on, like, okay, can you multiply things back together as far as factoring goes? Or can you check it with a graph or another resource, where kids would never have asked it about a book assignment because they're not as motivated to know if they got it right. I guess one more thing about Khan
Yeah.
is they have to answer this question. They don't get to skip questions. I know my students, a lot of times they'll see one that has fractions or decimals or something that's difficult in a book assignment, and they will skip it. And they don't care. They're moving on to something else that they know how to do. Whether they're in the website or in the app, Khan will not let them skip a question. So if I have this up on the website and I open up the app because I don't want to answer that question, it's going to be the same question. I have to answer it. So they either have to get help, take a hint. The hints, they don't get credit for moving on. As far as I've completed it successfully on my own, it makes them complete 5 questions on their own.
All right, we also like Khan Academy because it asks a variety of questions. Some might be just computation-based, like the one that we had up there. There's going to be some matching questions. There's error analysis. There might be some application problems. There's others that make them analyze a graph or analyze a situation. And so that unique questioning, you might not always get that out of a textbook. So some other perks of that. Again, Khan Academy, there's a lot to offer, so exploring that some more. I'm going to pass things over to Laura, and she's going to talk more about the teacher side of Khan Academy.
And actually, you want to go back a slide real quick? Just even some of the ones that we were doing with factoring, it wasn't always your basic factoring question. It was, yes, they were in there, but there were ones that were like area mixed in with stuff. So like as you go through a question set, the first question might not be the exact same questions that they're going to see through all of them. So you're going to kind of want to go be a student, explore those questions, see what types of questions are being asked, because the second and third question might be very different than the first. Okay, so just kind of going through, we make sure we don't answer all the questions right the first time, just to see what kinds of questions we're going to get. And what we've seen with Khan is it does take and accelerate and give them a little more challenging questions if they answer things right the first couple times, and if they get them wrong, it does take them kind of down a level. Which is helpful for our kids because we don't want them to be frustrated.
Yeah.
All right, so taking a look at, how do we assign these to our kids? So depending on what we're assigning, if it's 1 or 2 question sets, we might just put them, on our calendar, or we might just put it at the bottom of our notes or something. But we did a whole factoring unit where it was self-paced for the kids. They could go as fast or as slow as they needed to, get as help for any of the sets that they wanted to. And so this is just an example of our menu that we gave them. It had 5 or 6? Yeah. 5 or 6 different sets that they were going through. We did have some concerns with some of the videos, not because they weren't mathematically sound, but because we had spent a lot of time talking about standard form of a quadratic. A is our leading coefficient, B goes with X, and C is our constant. And we noticed when we watched the videos in Khan that matched some of them, they were using A, B, and C in different ways, and we thought that would confuse our kids. So we decided that we were going to make some videos just to make sure our constants were labeled the same and be consistent with what we've been telling our students. So giving this menu, it gave us the opportunity to put a QR code to some of our videos for resources for our students, but as well for our kids to keep track of what they'd done and what they hadn't done. That's one thing about Khan that is a little tricky, is it doesn't necessarily keep track for the kids. It's harder for the student to see if they've completed things or not. On your side, as far as the teacher end goes, you can definitely see what the kids have done. So I just kind of screenshotted a little bit of my data. It would have student names going for each one of the rows. And then you get to see a couple things. Like this is the grid that would show just, did kids complete the problems? And it's going to show that it's going to designate kids as a light blue, which means they are practiced. They should know what they're doing. They're pretty good. Or red, which means they're struggling. It'll also do a dark blue, which means they've practiced a lot. So I can just kind of clearly see I need to help this student here. They're stuck, they can't go on. I need to help them out. Same thing with this student. I might be able to have this student who's gone through all of them help a student who's struggling. Maybe I can ask them to work with this student to help them learn a little bit more about that factoring with a leading coefficient that's not equal to 1. In some of the other pieces, and I'll show you the website here in a minute as far as the teacher end goes, it does show you how many questions did it take a student to pass out of it. So like if I'm supposed to be working on 5 questions, I can see if it took Sally 9 questions or if it took her 20 questions. I can see if she answered just 5 and she's done. I can also see how long it took them to complete. Did it take them 10 minutes? Did it take them an hour? So that I can see kind of where my students are at. Is the content being challenging enough for them? And then I can also see when, which is kind of an interesting thing. Are they completing it while they're at school? Are they completing it at home? So I can take a look at those pieces. And I'll take you, kind of show you what that. So this is like just one of the ways that you can see. So I add a class. You give students a code. I have my kids sign in with Google because they all have Google email addresses. So I have them sign in with Google, and then I get all sorts of information. I have them add me as a coach, and for any student I'm coaching, I get this grid, which again shows you all these kids. It can tell me how many, if I scroll over them, it tells me how many questions they've answered. It can tell me if they've never answered any questions, which tells me a lot of information too. I can look at activity, and so like my kids haven't done anything in the last 7 days on here, but if I go to 30, we should have some activity. So you can tell who's working on stuff, who's not, who do I need to go talk to, who do I need to help. We have had a little bit of issue with internet access, but not a ton. I have a couple kids that don't have internet access at home, so I can give them a couple questions out of the book if I need to, but most of this was done in class for our factoring unit. And then you can also see, like, while they're in your class, like, obviously my kids aren't doing anything today, but not in con. Hopefully they're doing something today. But looking here, you can see what kids are doing while they're in your room. So you can check. With iPads, sometimes it can be a management issue as far as what are my kids doing? Are they watching videos? Are they on their email? So that kind of helps with a little bit of classroom management as well. All right, so we have run into some I don't know, issues with Khan, not because it's not great math. They've taken, sometimes they'll change the name slightly. So if I'm searching, I fell in love with this exercise set, it's great. We've noticed that when we go to use it maybe in second semester, that the name has changed slightly. Like instead of divide polynomials, it might be polynomial division or dividing polynomials. So what we've learned to do, instead of writing down the whole name and making sure I have the full name of the exercise set that we want our kids to use or the video that we want our kids to use, we've documented pathways. So we found it in the curriculum, like Madeline was showing you. We go to Algebra 2, we go into this section, and then we find it there. We've also noticed, like with the iPads and sometimes with the laptops, if I search for it on my computer, I can find it. Sometimes we can't find it in our app, depending on the version of the app that we have or whatnot. So we've just learned document how to get to the item that we want to use instead of just documenting the name of it, because things sometimes change. Students get sometimes a little frustrated with Khan, depending on what we're doing with it. The app sometimes will auto cap the first letter of things. So when it's a variable, it auto caps it. Khan will count it wrong. So you have to have some conversations on your kids on how to enter things, how specific they need to be. Rounding can be an issue with all students, so we have to make sure we pay attention directions. So some of those pieces, you want to make sure that the Khan Academy set that you might pick, decide if it's going to be something that's going to work for your kids. Is it something that's too specific? Is it not specific enough? So, and then the last thing we've noticed is that sometimes they just change the resources. Technology is changing all the time, and for one reason or another, Khan Academy has gotten rid of some of the sets that we've absolutely fallen in love with. So it's kind of heartbreaking sometimes when we think we have a resource there that all of a sudden it's gone, or it's changed names and we have to go find it underneath something else. So those are just some cautions when you're using Khan Academy. Just make sure that, like, you know, maybe a week before you want to use it, it's still there and you know how to get to it. All right, so then the last one we're going to talk about is GoFormative. So I'm going to have you guys go ahead to the GoFormative that we used after we did our little domain and range lesson. It also included a parent function. So if you can go to goformative.com/join, and then the quick code is up there for you. I have my students enter in and join my class. I'm not having you guys create like a username and a password. I want you just to join as a guest, because what we've also found is if you join as a student, then you cannot also be a teacher. They don't overlap. So I don't want you using like your school email to join things in. So you're just going to be a guest today. And then you can see the differences between being a guest and having a kid in a class. So I'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and kind of play with that, and then I'll show you also what the teacher side of it looks like. So it should say domain and range at the top, and you should have a bunch of graphs, parent functions.
And once you get in there, you're going to see these little blue squares with numbers on them. Those are the questions. So if you click on number 1, a question will pop up for you to answer.
So you just want to go to quick code up here. Yeah, you don't have to join. Just go to quick code, like GoFormative. If you go goformative.com/join, it should just be a big giant box for you to put that quick code in. Otherwise, up at the top right-hand corner, instead of creating an account today, you can just go ahead and enter that in the quick code box up at the top. All right, so one nice thing as you go through these questions, I'll just have on the screen and I'll kind of click through our questions, is you get live results. So you can look at the questions that kids are answering as they're answering. So like right now I can see how we're all doing on number 1. I can click a little farther and see how we're doing on some of the other questions. And right now I have it assigned as just open. Okay, so there's different assigning features, but right now I just have it as open. So you are just entering your answers and I will close it at the end and then I'll give you feedback. I don't have to, as a teacher, wait until students are done to give feedback. I can go in and choose a question for a kid. So like if I wanted to go, I can give feedback. Now the one drawback for you guys sending as guests today is I can't give you written feedback. I can tell you if you're right or wrong, but I can't give you written feedback. With my students in my class, I create a class, I give them a code, they sign into my class, and I can then give them written feedback on anything, whether it's a multiple choice question or a graph or any of those. So like this is the same quiz that I give into my students. You can turn the student names on and off. So if I wanted to, I could use this, say, okay, we haven't drawn these before. This was pretty rough the first time we did it. But I can take and look at these guys and say, okay, we could go through and grade these as a class. So I could say, all right, guys, what do you think about this one here? And I can zoom in and we can say, hey, let's look at that graph. What do we think about that graph? Does that have the same domain and range I was asking for? And yes, we can grade it together, or no, and we can give it some feedback. As a teacher, I can go through and for this student, take a look at that graph. I can go look at it closer if I need to, and then if I would like to, I can leave them some feedback as far as, you know, domain, I can't remember what this one is, but domain needs to be all real numbers. And then I click enter and I send it. I'm not going to send this because I don't want my student to get confused what I'm doing to their assignment here, but you can go ahead and give them feedback while they're taking it, which is great. So I could be giving you guys feedback on the first couple if I had you guys in a class. I could give you feedback on those first few questions that we're starting to answer, so you could maybe help a student that is confused before they do the whole assignment. We did, here I'll go back so that you guys can take a look at those graphs. So here are your graphs, and again, I can sort them a couple ways. I can sort them by name. When I score them, I sort them by score, so it puts the students that I need to put comments on first. It sorts all of those that are wrong first, and then puts everybody who got it right. So that way I can make sure I go and give those students feedback without having to sort through the entire list, which is really nice.
So will it score the ones that they draw?
It will not score the ones that they draw. So I either have to go through and score those guys, or again, if you were interested, like if this is our first round at domain and range, maybe we go ahead and score them as a class. Okay? But it will score everything that is multiple choice or short answer or true or false. The nice thing about the short answer is you can, like, I'm trying to think, some of our kids on some of this, maybe this isn't a great example, but sometimes you get like, you're expecting an equation. You're expecting y equals 2x plus 5. Well, I have a kid that didn't put y equals 2x plus 5. They put 2x plus 5. So they got the majority of it right. I can check it as right. I can then leave them a comment and say, you don't really have an equation, you have an expression, make sure you put y equals, but you understand now that the student understands the concept. So we had we did, regression. Mm-hmm. And looked at some linear data and some quadratic data, and we noticed our kids, for the most part on those, they understand the ideas, they're just not good at writing the equations, being specific with rounding, and so that helped us with some of those options as far as seeing what their answers were and telling them you're not rounding right, your answer needs to be more specific. So it gave us a good way to give those comments to those kids.
Well, you had to preview for me. Okay, so we created this PDF file, the page behind it, and some of the question numbers match up, but if you scroll down a bit more, like my question 4 and 5, they both go with number 4. So we've learned, don't number it on the actual document, and we'll show you that. just kind of place those numbers in. And
Or
we'll
you
show
could-
you how. So that was a little confusing for students.
You could
So-
we've learned we can label it with
Yeah.
letters if we want to talk about, like, if we'd like to talk about the parabola that we've assigned number 4, we've learned to put a letter in front of it, and then we can talk about GoFormative's question 4 and 5 that go with letter K
Yes.
or whatever it would
Yeah.
be. So we've learned a lot.
Yeah.
The thing that makes it the most math friendly, though, that the reason like this is my go-to place is because you can build it with a PDF. So I don't have to be able to type in equations. I don't have to be able to draw the graphs in this particular format. I just have to be able to create it somehow and export it as a PDF. So that's been pretty amazing for us. I can kind of show you a couple other ones, just what we've kind of learned as far as student input. Let's see here. So like here's the one that we just did with quadratics and regression, which students tend to do fairly well on, but I mean there's some pitfalls that we know about. We did differences, and we know that the students sometimes don't subtract right. And so we wanted to help give them a little bit of feedback before they went through and subtracted all of the pieces to the puzzle, and then used those to do another round of subtraction, which tends to frustrate students. So for this particular one, when I assigned it to have it grade as they go. So a kid could understand I did that problem right before I go and use that piece on in another piece. We learned that in order for them to be able to type in a quadratic, it's kind of difficult, but I can ask them for the coefficients for that quadratic pretty effectively. The other thing that we kind of learned was I can get them to draw graphs. I can get them to show work. I can also get them to take a picture of their calculator screen, which I could never see. Like a student would always ask me the next day, hey, I got this wrong. I don't know what happened. I can have them take a picture and store their calculator screen to see what they were looking at. Were they looking in the right window? Did they type the parabola in wrong? Was it not the correct model that they were using when they thought they were using the correct model? So that was huge for us, just to be able to see things that we hadn't been able to see before. So yeah, creating with a PDF has been really pretty simple. Like most of the pieces came from the textbook. We used a textbook assignment that we wanted to take pieces out of, so we didn't have to create the whole thing on our own. I've used test generators to create PDFs really fast as far as being able to get a quick exit ticket or a quick assignment for students. So just think of the avenues on which you guys are making tests and you're making quizzes and you're making things for your students already. You can just import them, and then all you have to do to add questions is you tag. So like you come in with this little box. So if I wanted to add another question, I hope it's going to make me close all these. You get this little symbol here, and it's a plus sign when you go to add it. It's going to make me close all like 20 boxes, so I don't think that's quite worth it. But and you just click where you want that question to add. If you miss where you want it to add, you can adjust it later, and you can delete questions. It's really, really simple as far as building one. So I'll just kind of take you back here. Okay, so the question types were huge. The fact that we could put a show your work problem in there for math was huge. When we first started doing this, we hadn't been able to do that with any other feature or do it well. It does work a lot better on the iPads than it does on the laptops. Like if you're gonna have a kid write things out, it's gonna be tough for them to do on there. But students have phones and stuff too that you could access it on. That would be helpful. I haven't used a ton of the different content, but you can put a YouTube video in there. There's all sorts of different content you can add. So if you wanted to do a PDF and then add a YouTube video on that PDF for the kids to watch, you can do that too. And then upload and transform, this piece right here would be where you would upload a PDF if you wanted to use it. So I talked a little bit about the assigning options, but here they are. Open is what I had for you guys this morning, so that all you were doing was submitting answers. It didn't score it for you at all, but for a closed with scoring, it's going to score it as the students go, and they aren't going to be able to change their answers. What we've used a lot for our homework replacement is the instant scoring. So a student can see, did they get it right or wrong? They can, choose to fix it before they move on, or they can go back and say, okay, I missed number 5. I need to go back and take a look at it. With our quadratic regression and linear regression that we were doing, because our students weren't rounding right, they were making silly mistakes when they were writing their equations, we expected them to go back through. We gave them feedback, and we told them that they needed to go back and correct everything in order to get credit for their homework assignment. All right, and so then the last one is kind of just how does that feedback look? Because I know I couldn't give you guys feedback, written feedback, but what has been super helpful for me is kind of taking my role as less of, okay, I'm checking through all these papers that I might not be able to add any comments on, or the kids have already taken the assessment that goes along with, I'm just going back through stuff that they already have been assessed on, so they're not engaged in any comments I'm leaving them. And it's taken my role more to the place where I can take a look at the kids who need help, and I can give them instant feedback, and they're still working on the concept. It's before the assessment, it's before the test, so they're interested in the feedback that I'm giving them. Okay, so it's helped me a ton, especially like the multiple choice ones. We put in the common mistakes. So I know that if a kid answered, any of my students who answered A, they all did the same thing. They all did the same thing wrong. So I can give that feedback to that kid very, very quickly. I can just even copy and paste. Here's what I tell the student, and for everybody who answered A, I'm going to fill those in. Okay, now B, here's the common error for B, and I can fill those pieces in. Again, this was just a little screenshot of our students. Yeah, they all look very similar. They all have similar pieces, but we wanted them to pay attention to rounding, especially with their models, because if they don't round their models right, then all of a sudden their answers that are coming out of their models are going to be a little off or a little different. So being able to go through and comment and saying, okay, you have your slope and your y-intercept in the wrong order, or to this student, we need to work on rounding. Pay attention. Do you know that the 1,000th is, 3 places and 100th is 2? And then finally, that last one that was really big for us, something I hadn't thought about was, yes, I can get a kid to show me their work in solving pieces, but being able to see things like their calculator screen, what are they looking at when they're making those choices? Kind of giving them an opportunity to show me what they're seeing so that I can tell, are they looking at the material wrong, or is the material they're looking at wrong, and they understand how to make those choices. I was going to say, do you have other things on feedback? Good. All right. So we wanted to give you a little bit of time. I know we showed you quickly going through the Desmos, going through GoFormative. I guess one more thing I can show you with GoFormative is if you're interested in doing some quick options, when you sign in as a teacher, when you go to your dashboard, which is what they call kind of like your home screen, it comes with some pre-made ones for you. So if you're just looking for a quick exit ticket, there's things that are pre-made that are just, you can add your information in, and they're just basic. I'd like to learn more about draw something that we learned today, and it could be, gives you kind of that space. So there are some pre-made things out there for you, but as far as GoFormative goes, it's been amazing to be able to create things that have the rich content of math, and it's the ease of using that PDF is amazing. All right, I didn't check the back channel. Are there any questions that you guys have for us? Yes, sir.
GoFormative, some of the special math characters and stuff, are they able to put those in, or they got to kind of for the next one, they're going to have to put the caret key in?
If you do have them type, then they're going to have to use the caret key and that sort of thing. So we've done, it depends on what we're asking as far as what do we want the kids to know. If I want to know, can they solve a whole equation? I'm probably going to ask it instead of a short answer where they're going to type it and I'm going to get some strange things. I'm probably going to either ask it as far as a show your work, and I'm going to have to grade it, or I can give it to them as far as maybe I want them to find the coefficients. And so we've tagged and given each coefficient a question that we can have them type in their answer, and then it'll auto check it for us. Or we go in and we'll do like a multiple choice with the top errors that we're looking for. All right. Well, if you don't have any other questions for us, then you can go ahead and explore. We kind of wanted you guys to have a few minutes to go look at GoFormative, go look through Khan Academy, and then let us know if we can help you.